This week, we kick things off with a deep dive into the Hackberry Pi. Full details will be released on this episode and in a subsequent blog post that will come out at a future date and time, hopefully soon. Then, in the security news, did I tell you about Badcam? Oh, that's right. It wasn't public until August 8th. So now I can actually talk about it. So I will definitely do that. Will Perplexity buy Chrome? ESP32 Bus Pirates poison telemetry. Docker image security, fully open source quantum sensors, securing your car, flippers, and show me the money, bringing your printer and your desktop into Starbucks, paying a ransom, you may need approval. AI, is it a shield or a spear? No authentication, that could be a problem. Transient bugs, are they a realistic threat? You can run Linux if you want to. And who still uses AOL dial-up or even remembers AOL dial-up? All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Security Weekly and Cyber Risk TV are headed back to one of the biggest identity security events of the year, Octane 2025, put on by Okta. Live September 24th through the 26th, the vibrant city of Las Vegas, Octane 2025 brings together the best minds in identity, security, and technology innovation. And this year, we're turning up the volume. Security Weekly will be on site in full force with Mandy Logan and Adrian Sanabria leading the charge. Get ready for live-streamed executive interviews, exclusive on-site editorial coverage from SC Media, and brand new this year, a live-streamed episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. It's your chance to engage with identity leaders, dive into the future of AI security, and hang out with your favorite Security Weekly hosts. And here's the best part. Security Weekly listeners get an exclusive discount. Just head to securityweekly.com/Octane to register and use the promo code OKTNSCMA25 to get your conference pass for $200. Whenever we talk to security teams, one thing is clear. They are under more pressure than ever, facing increasingly complex and higher stakes threats. That's where Flashpoint comes in. Flashpoint empowers organizations to make mission-critical decisions to keep their people and assets safe. Flashpoint combines cutting-edge technology with expert intelligence teams, empowering security leaders with the critical data and alerts and analysis needed to act before threats escalate. And with Ignite, Flashpoint's award-winning threat intelligence platform, you get access to real-time insights, finished intelligence, and analytics all in one place. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Flashpoint. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate studio, this is Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 887, being recorded on Wednesday, August 13th, 2025. I am your host, Paul Asadorian, joined by Mr. Jeff Mann. Jeff, welcome.
Good to be back on the show, Paul, after a very, very busy, enriching, and rewarding week out at Hacker Summer Camp this past week. It's Wednesday. I'm still recovering.
I bet. Mr. Sam Bound is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening, and I'm still in Vegas. After this, I go to New York City for Hope, so I'm only halfway through.
Good, Good for you, man. Love your conference docket you got going on. It's great stuff. Looking forward to hear all about Hope when you get back, too. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. You can attend InfoSec World 2025. It's happening October 27th through the 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, with pre-event workshops happening on the 25th through the 26th of October, and a post-event workshop happening October 29th through the 30th. Connect, learn, and level up your cyber game. Save 25% now with the code ISW25- SW at securityweekly.com/ISW 2025. Don't forget to tune in to our show live Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You get that link in the Discord channel. securityweekly.com/Discord is your invite if you have not yet joined our Discord server. Oh, so we're starting off now talking about the Hackberry Pi, which I'm super excited about, except I forgot to charge mine before the start of the show, but I have like pictures and stuff. So I guess before I showcase all of the hardware, I want to talk about like why you would want this device or use this device and some of the history behind it. Now, I am working on a blog post, so you'll see my notes if they come up on the screen, and they do, where I've talked about basically the first part, like, why do you want one of these devices? Some people call them a cyber deck. Some people build them on Raspberry Pis and all kinds of other stuff. And I'll show you quickly my attempts at those and the reason why I like the Hackberry Pi the best. But there's a lot of times where I don't want to break my own laptop and or desktop configuration doing something hackery, right? I may be trying a new hacking tool technique, jamming FCC close your ears, but I may be trying to do something hackery, but I don't want to mess up my desktops and laptops that I use in my regular production. So I'm like, I need another machine. Now, I may want that other machine to be something smaller than a laptop. I'm not a huge fan of carrying multiple laptops, not a huge fan of dual booting. And I want something that is a little more portable than a laptop for cases where I don't want to bring my laptop. Going out in the field, going on vacation, traveling for whatever. Maybe I bring one laptop, maybe no laptop, and I'm just bringing my cyber deck. So I need something suitable for that. Also, it's nice, again, to be out in the field. Maybe I'm testing Wi-Fi or RF equipment or something way far away from home. Maybe I have to walk through the woods and find a cell tower, and I'm tasked with, doing a pen test or something. A lot of scenarios where I just want something more portable, preferably battery powered as well, because I may be in a location where I don't have ready access to power. So I've tested a lot of different gear, and you probably heard me talk about these on the show. So I've tested Raspberry Pis. So hold off on the Raspberry Pi 5, but all the Raspberry Pis, like 3 and 4s, I've built with screens and all kinds of stuff, and I put Kali Linux on, and it's really, really slow. Like, it's just really, the performance is just less than desirable. So I was excited with the Raspberry Pi 5 to perhaps have something that is more performant. And my first attempt at that, so you could build a Raspberry Pi 5 with the NVMe header, with an NVMe drive, put an external display on it. It gets kind of clunky because of the NVMe hat and cases, and I that could work if you want to go down that route. I also tested the Raspberry Pi 5 with Kali Linux with an NVMe on my Electro Crowview Note, which is basically, it's like a laptop, but it doesn't have a computer in it. So it's essentially a portable device that can power your device, have a screen, keyboard, and mouse. We've talked about it in the show. We've shown it off on the show, actually. The problem with that is, like, performance-wise, it's great. And user interface-wise, it's amazing because you've got essentially a laptop. But again, if you don't want to travel with a laptop, if you go with the Crowview Note, your Raspberry Pi is hanging out the side. We showed it on the show. I don't know if you remember. You basically have this like single board computer hanging off the side of your laptop. It doesn't make it nice to sit anywhere. It's very fragile. So that's the problem with that. Now, I have tested out mini PCs. Have you ever seen a mini PC with a screen that's built into it? Those are super cool. Got one of those running Kali Linux. The problem with that is it requires power, like an external power source. And the keyboard for that one is a virtual keyboard. So if you don't bring your own keyboard, you have to use like the on-screen keyboard, and on-screen keyboards are just not good for a lot of things. So just typing in a bunch of hackery commands. I did also try the Kali Linux Net Hunter. So I rooted one of my Android phones. I put Net Hunter on there. I think I've talked about that on the show. Tends to be a little buggy, problematic. Like, I got it working, but I'm like, if I do like the wrong thing, then it's not going to work. And then some of the commands were crashing and such like that. So I didn't have a greatest experience with Net Hunter. Now, those who want to spend some more time with it, maybe have a better supported phone that they put it on or whatnot, may have better luck. There's also that like Kali Net Hunter Pi Tail, right? It gives you the interface to it and stuff like that. But they can give you the interface on your phone to a Raspberry Pi running Kali Linux. Because I've also tried some of the other Pi Zeros zero W's with Kali Linux. Again, not performant enough. And then Larry and I did at one time show you our uConsole Clockwork Pis. Those are awesome keyboard, mouse, kind of similar to the Hackberry Pi, except the keyboard is not great. Keyboard and mouse is not great on those. And the version that I have only supports a Compute Module 4, which in my opinion is not performant enough to do everyday tasks in Kali Linux. So, given all of those above experiments, I decided to delve in and go, well, what else is out there? And I stumbled on, I don't know how I stumbled on these things mostly when I read my security news for the week. And I'm like, oh, shiny new hardware. I must acquire one of these. And so I found the Hackberry Pi. So Zitao Tech is the person who maintains the GitHubs and I believe did all the designs for these Hackberry Pi 5s. Electro, I believe, is the distribution partner for these. So you can go to Electro's site, and I'll have all the links to all of this when I publish the blog post. And so the Electro site you can buy, there's a few different models of the Hackberry Pi 5, which are based on this very particular hardware that gives you a screen, keyboard, and mouse in a battery-powered device that runs a Compute Module 5 and can support an NVMe inside of it. And I was like, this is great. So their CyberDeck costs about $168 was the model that I chose. And that doesn't come with any of the other stuff. So it doesn't come with the Compute Module, the NVMe, or an SD card. But you do get a travel case with it, along with some tools and other things, and a really, really nice design. So mine was the Hackberry Pi CM5 9900. And again, I think the differences are largely like different style keyboards, maybe mice on there as well. The keyboard that's on it actually isn't bad. You know, the three of us sitting here on the show, we all wear glasses.
It's funny that you opted on this, because when you were showing all the things you ruled out and you were talking about the limitations of the keyboard, I was thinking, I wonder if anybody's tried to like resurrect an old BlackBerry, and because everybody loved the keyboard on a blackboard. And then here is one that looks, now, is it an actual keyboard? I'm looking at a very small screen. Is it an actual keyboard or is it a virtual keyboard?
No, it's an actual keyboard.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get a physical tactile response.
At first glance, it kind of looks like a BlackBerry.
Like a BlackBerry, right? And like Jeff said, I agree. Most people like the keyboard on the BlackBerry. So it does come with an aluminum chassis, but a 3D printed center. Now, all of the specifications are on the GitHub repo for this. And so since the screen housing in the front here and this back plate are aluminum, the middle is actually 3D printed. And since all of these designs for the entire thing, schematics, GPIO pinout, like everything is in the GitHub, including some STL reference designs for this middle piece. And what I found is that people on the internet who are amazing generated their own STL files to make modifications so that you can put an external antenna adapter on there, which I've done with this one. So I 3D printed this green part of my Hackberry Pi 5. You can go on Maker World and just search for Hackberry Pi and it'll come right up. I think there's only one or two designs. This one was really good. My antenna's a little crooked. Like, it was my first attempt. I could, print more of them and kind of perfect.
You could do better.
I could do better. Yeah. But I hacked this one together. But again, these are 3D printable and customizable. So you can do that. And I thought it looked kind of cool. And gave me that external antenna connector. And it's kind of a nice thing to have in, like, I didn't have to build what they call a CyberDeck from scratch. I could kind of pick up where someone left off and then customize it for my needs. I'm like, that's what I want to do. CyberDecks are amazing. If I had more time, I would totally build my own custom one. But I'm like, for $168, this is a great starting point, in my opinion. And super cool that it has that 3D printed capability on the chassis. Now, it has a 5,000 milliamp battery, which is awesome. The one thing I love about the battery is it has a MagSafe on it. So if I get the MagSafe, you can actually charge it with the battery, which I just thought was really nice thought, right? To put that on there. Because the battery is pretty beefy. I get pretty good battery life. Now, if I'm running a Wi-Fi attack or something in Kali, like running Wi-Fi on Kali Linux, which I have done on this, your battery's obviously gonna drain because you're powering the radio, potentially 2 radios, right? You may have one that you're attacking and one to use as a back channel for communication. So it does have the built-in Wi-Fi on the Hackberry Pi on the CM5 module that this antenna is connected to. And this is just standard antenna connector. I've had, different antennas on there. But with one of the changes in Kali Linux was it supports, I think, better the monitor mode capabilities on the internal Wi-Fi on the CM5 and Raspberry Pi devices. I'm like, well, that's great. I can just goes into monitor mode, and it works fantastic. By the way, I tested; it works great. Now, if you're connected over SSH via this Wi-Fi connection, when you go into monitor mode, your connection's going to drop. So keep that in mind. That you'll want multiple ways. If you're not interfacing directly with the keyboard and screen, you're going to want some kind of back channel. It is a 720 by 720 touchscreen display. I will also release my config file that I have on here. I spent a lot of time troubleshooting this display, getting it to work correctly, getting the HDMI port to work correctly requires like some tweaking of your config.txt and command cmd something .txt. There's 2 configuration files for your Raspberry Pi. So you got to, I'll publish those so you don't have to go through the headache that I went through. Because it does have an external HDMI port, 2 onboard USB ports, USB-C for charging, power switch, a toggle that turns off the keyboard and mouse. So if you don't read the documentation like I did and you're wondering why your keyboard and mouse aren't working, you just got to hit that little red switch on the side. And that's obviously for travel if I don't want to accidentally push buttons while I have it in my bag or in my pocket.
Especially if it's working while you're
especially if it's doing something, right? Yeah.
Right.
So total price wise, I'm not sure. So like your parts list goes like this. You'll need a Hackberry Pi CM5, which is the one that I have, $9,900, $168. You'll need a Raspberry Pi CM5 Lite module. There's some incompatibility with the regular module. It's all in the documentation on Electro and on the GitHub. So make sure you get the right CM5 Lite module for this. And that comes in different configurations. I did the highest amount of RAM because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use this to run Kali Linux. And I'm pretty happy with it so far. So I'm like, I'll go ahead and spend the extra money, get the 16 gigs of RAM. Runs great. You'll also want to get an 2242 NVMe SSD. I use the official ones from Raspberry Pi because I find they work the best with the Raspberry Pi ecosystem. I haven't had any problems with it. And people recommend that online. They're like, yes, could you get cheaper ones? Yes, but then is it going to be compatible or not? I don't know. I know the Raspberry Pi one is compatible. And then you'll need like a 32 gig micro SD card because this device will actually runs both operating systems. It runs Raspbian off the SD card and it runs Kali Linux off the NVMe. And the path to doing that is first you put Raspbian on the SD card, boot the device up on the SD card. Then inside of Raspbian, you run commands to then pop Kali Linux on the NVMe. Then you go into Raspberry config, you change your boot order so that you're booting off your NVMe. If that fails, it'll fall back to the SD card. I do have to get better. I want some better mechanism to switch between them. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Like, I almost wish there was a button or you could reprogram a button. I bet you could probably reprogram a button that could switch the boot order, right?
I thought you said you didn't like dual boot, Paul.
Yeah, but in this case, it's kind of handy because sometimes if I want to troubleshoot one operating system or the other, I might want to boot up on it. So that would be kind of a handy feature.
But how often do you have to go back to the Raspberry?
Yeah, I haven't
OS
had
to tweak.
Yeah, if there was a catastrophic situation with my NVMe, but it was still trying to boot from it, I could just open up the back, take the NVMe out, and then it would boot from the SD card. But that's why I think like a switch would be a nice addition to that. Yeah, I didn't have the right screws for my NVMe, so I used tape. I think I talked about that on the show. So
couldn't
a little
3D print some screws.
Yeah, I probably could have 3D printed something to it's a great point. I probably should have 3D printed something. I did also get the external antenna kit too, which I'll link to when I publish the article. So yeah, that's the finished product running Kali Linux.
Do you have any pictures of the insides without the front and the back on?
I don't think so. I think I did, but I have not included them in this post yet.
One vote for, I'd love to see what it looks like on the inside.
Yeah, it's a pretty slick design. It also has like an I2C port. I'm not sure exactly what all the use cases are for that or why they included that, which is just kind of interesting. It's got a pretty good heat sink. It does, heat wise, it's been pretty good. It hasn't been overheating on me. And you can put other dongles on here, these USB ports. So if I wanted to have an additional Wi-Fi adapter and a Bluetooth adapter, and then maintain connectivity through the onboard, I could do that without having to bring a hub, which I think is nice. So it's got 2 onboard ports. If I wanted more, I could obviously add a hub. So yeah,
that was another question I was going to have. And, mind you, I've never touched a Raspberry Pi either, but how many connection options do you have on it? So you've got the Wi-Fi, you've got Bluetooth.
Yep.
And that's it primarily.
Basically, yeah. For Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, on board. Then you can add your own Wi-Fi in or Bluetooth or RTL SDRs on it as well, which is nice.
Not that anybody probably does this anymore, but could you configure it and add a LAN adapter to it, or would that be too big?
You could do an Ethernet to USB LAN adapter.
All right.
Yep. Absolutely, you could. Yeah,
that would be some kind of use case where you might want to plug something in to a network.
Right. If I've got specific stuff configured on here and I have my laptop with me, I could Ethernet, kind of tether to it and just create a network so I can always get access to it, then do all the Wi-Fi stuff, and it wouldn't matter if it kicked me off. So yeah, that's the device that's running Kali Linux. The screen's a little small. I'm not going to lie. Like sometimes I struggle to read the text on the screen. Got to make sure I got the right glasses on to read it. But
most of our audience is a lot younger than us. That's probably not
so
a
probably
problem
be fine
for them.
Right. So yeah, that's basically it. So again, there's a lot of cyber decks out there, but this is one that I've just really been loving. Like I hadn't found one that I really truly had fallen in love with. But this one I just did.
Give it a hug.
Yeah, I'm in love with it. It's great. Cool. It's great. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions? One of the things that's interesting about this platform is we were talking about I don't know if it was Electro. I think it was some other company. It wasn't Electro. That came out with a laptop that could basically take a Raspberry Pi CM5. Very similar to this platform, like essentially the same thing, except it's in a laptop form factor, not the BlackBerry-ish form factor that you have with the Hackberry Pi. That one was interesting because it had that add-on adapter that took up both USB-C ports on the device, but gave you access to all of the GPIO pins. When I researched how to do that with this Hackberry Pi, LLMs told me, and like I dug through some of the GitHub, the GPIOs are mapped for all of the peripherals that are included on the device. So I'm not sure how that other company that I can't remember the name of is giving you access to those GPIO pins. That's pretty awesome. So if you want to have something you take with you, another laptop that is a Raspberry Pi, which is kind of nice. It's not hanging off the side. The compute module is built. You just screw it right in to the laptop, and then you've got an add-on adapter. It gives you GPIO access. That's pretty cool too. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of want one of those as well, because I do sometimes miss the GPIO pins. What's nice about that is I could serial console into the device through the GPIO pins, but I can't. I haven't figured out a way, if that's possible on this, to have some kind of serial connection to it over USB or something. I haven't quite figured that out yet. So yeah, some of the options there in terms of getting access to because GPIO is really the heart and soul of the Raspberry Pi, right? That's what I think makes it a really great hacker platform, using the word hacker in the most broad sense of the term,
Mhm.
because it has all of those standard GPIO pins, right? And everyone makes software, gadgets, projects that interface with those pins, and they're all the same across all the Raspberry Pi devices. You don't really have that with a lot of these other devices. They have their own IO pins. Flipper Zero is an example, right? Many of the ones from M5 Stack, right? They do have expandable IO options, but they're not the standard. So any software, hardware you get for Raspberry Pi is compatible with GPIO. They were talking about that in one of the Linux podcasts I listened to, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's a great point. It is a really cool part of the ecosystem for Raspberry Pi. So having that on your cyber deck is probably good. I haven't figured out how to do that on this one, but I do like the laptop form factor that we talked about, I think, a couple of weeks ago.
I mean, I assume if you wanted to, you could plug in a conventional keyboard of sorts and a monitor and do things in a larger scale.
Yeah, if I'm doing a lot of work on it, Jeff, I have done that because it has HDMI and USB ports. I can connect a monitor, mouse, keyboard to it, and it will function like a desktop.
Right.
Which then I theorize, I'm like, could I take this thing with me instead of my laptop and use it to present at presentation, and just carry this with me, and I could carry a smaller bag with me, not a full backpack. But I don't know. I don't know.
Don't hate me for asking this, but I mean, I'm thinking about it in the context of, I've got my little portable laptop that I use for travel that is now probably 8 or 9 years old, and it's starting to get a little bit jankety, and not to mention it's Windows 10 and it's about to go out of support. But if I wanted to have something, most of my travel is to conferences for presentations. I just need something that can run PowerPoint essentially. So I hate to ask the question, but could you conceivably load Windows on this thing?
You could. I know people do run Windows on their Raspberry Pis. I haven't seen Windows running on a Compute Module 5 or read about it yet.
Or does Kali have something that can emulate PowerPoint and do it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's tools available to do that in Linux. I mean, I've presented on Linux many times.
Right.
But Windows will run on it. It'd be interesting to have that as like an SD card that you could boot from and boot Windows on it.
Yep.
But Jeff,
go ahead.
No, for that, I would not use Kali. I'd use something like Debian.
Yeah,
because Kali keeps changing every few months and they keep breaking things. It's not really for like a general purpose laptop. It's specifically for attack.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Agreed. Which is the other reason why I like having a separate device that just runs Kali, and that's where I do Kali and all my hackery, some of my hackery stuff right on there. So,
well, I might be interested in something like that just for the purposes of having something light and small to carry in my travels.
Yes. The mini PC is a good option to look into as well. I think you get better Windows support because those devices actually come with a Windows license. So the mini PC that I bought has a display integrated into it. I booted Kali from the SD card, but the internal SSD has Windows on it that you get a license to when you buy the device. So I've got one. My Windows 11 system at home is that mini PC that you saw. Where I do my Windows testing and all that stuff. Gotcha. And if I need an actual Windows box, I also have a Windows VM, which Windows VM will probably be an upcoming tech segment as well, because I thought it was pretty cool how I was able to build that Windows 11 one. But yeah, so if you're looking for a really awesome cyber deck, it doesn't necessarily break the bank, but it's not as cheap as some of the other options out there that I described. But there are options, right? There's different Hackberry Pi cases and screens and keyboard models out there. There's different compute modules. They range in price depending on how much RAM you want to put in it. You don't necessarily have to run it on the NVMe. You could run it in the SD card. I found that running Kali Linux on the Raspberry Pi 5 platform with an NVMe is performant to be able to do some hackery stuff. Now, you're not running Hashcat on it, obviously, to crack the passwords, but it works totally fine to grab I mean, you can use an ESP32 to sniff, Wi-Fi packets, but the advantage here, I think, over the ESP32 devices is you get full support for all the different dongles, Wi-Fi, RTSDR. It's basically a desktop in your hands, which is pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome because the ESP32 is limited to 2.4 gigahertz, except for one model that was still kind of in beta-ish. Haven't seen those readily available on the market.
Well, you started to talk about what the investment was, and you kind of said you didn't have an exact figure, but ballpark your device that you've built there. What do you think it cost?
Around $250.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So the one of the articles that talked about a mini PC, like a fully functioning desktop PC in like the Intel NUC format, like Intel doesn't make NUCs anymore, was like $1,100. But there was like a really beefy system. So to have this kind of portable thing with the battery for around $250, I think is pretty good. So super happy with that.
Sounds good to me.
I will be. I'll let everyone know what the link is to the blog post once it gets published. You'll have all the links in there to go build it. If you're listening to this and you're like, I really want one, just find me on social media. I'll dig up some of the links for you in the meantime. All righty. With that, we will transition to the news for this week. Your company runs on Google Workspace, but it's an afterthought for most security tools. Material Security is the first and only platform purpose-built to protect Google Workspace, securing email, data, and user accounts from advanced threats. From blocking sophisticated phishing attacks in Gmail to preventing unauthorized app usage and fixing risky file sharing in G Drive, Material continuously protects your data. Don't settle for second best. Protect Google Workspace with Material Security. Learn more at securityweekly.com/material security. You can't protect what you can't see. Everyone knows that, right? That's why Run Zero gives you total visibility across your internal and external attack surfaces. Worried about unknown and unmanageable devices? They got those covered too. Run Zero also helps you illuminate all types of exposures, even the elusive ones. They go beyond CVEs to tackle the hard stuff, even 0 days. No agents, no authentication, just crazy deep data about your assets and exposures that focus on the risks that actually matter, not an endless sea of CVEs. Try it free. Visit securityweekly.com/run zero to get started. Where I am super excited to talk about Badcam because I was just telling Jeff and Sam, if you look at the disclosure timeline, I think we disclosed it to Lenovo in March. I forget the exact date in March that we did. We disclosed it in March, worked with them to have Mickey and Jesse present on August 8th. So I've been like sitting here going, I really wish I could talk about this. And now finally I can. Now, Sam or Jeff, did you guys go to DEF CON and happen to see this talk?
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it? Okay. Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, I didn't really do DEF CON this year. I just LobbyConned on Friday because I had to get home for my granddaughter's birthday party on Sunday.
I gotcha.
But I was successfully able to LobbyCon. I even approached Goons. I said, I just want to let you know, I don't have a badge. And they're like, oh, we've never thought about LobbyCon before. But it's the convention center. It's huge. Right. And the only time they're really checking badges is if you walk into a talk or walk into a village. I did go to several villages because I went to ones where I knew the people and they just kind of let me in anyway. So I was able to see everything I wanted to see in the few hours I was able to walk the floor, the convention center. But no, I did not see any talks.
So I think the major thing about this research, Mickey and Jesse, obviously did a great job. Obviously, I'm hugely biased, by the way, because I work very closely with Mickey and Jesse, and we all work for the same company, and I've been very close to this for a long time. So if you want to poo-poo it, poke holes at it, please do, because I'm just excited about it. But the revelation for me was that you can, as an attacker, conduct bad USB attacks on an existing piece of hardware or peripheral. Mm-hmm. So normally, I think it was 2014 when we first learned at Black Hat about the bad USB attacks. As an attacker, I would have to create a bad USB thumb drive and or device, right? There's several of them now. Hack5 makes amazing products that do it. You can build your own on a number of different platforms. I've talked about them on the show, but you have to build this device. Then you have to be physically present at the computer, and you have to plug it in for it to execute its payloads. And essentially, it acts like a keyboard and just types your commands directly in. Now, there's a lot of intricacies in there that I won't get into bad USB, but that's the high level. So the revelation for me when I first learned of this, I'm like, so wait, this means that attack scenario 1 is I'm an attacker. I compromise, let's say, a Windows PC. I look around on that Windows PC and I see that it has a webcam attached to it and happens to be one of these vulnerable webcams. Then I can upload custom firmware or flash custom firmware onto that webcam, put any attack tools I want on there, including tools that allow me to do bad USB attacks and inject keystrokes. Now my tool set and much of my hacking activities is happening on the webcam. So I don't have to bring a device to the system. I weaponize this. There was a realization when we got the language right. I don't know if there was an LLM that helped us with that, but this is the weaponization of a USB peripheral. There haven't been too many talks or pieces of research that have gone through weaponizing an existing component and or peripheral that's attached to the device. And that was the thing that I thought was novel and unique about this research.
Well, in these modern times, what kind of peripherals besides a webcam typically get attached to a device these days?
Well, there's internal components. So it was interesting at Black Hat this year. There was another talk about the control vault from Dell, which is a component that's on the motherboard essentially, but presents itself as a USB device that was vulnerable in the same way these webcams are vulnerable. It allowed you to install firmware. Well, you have to exploit it in a vulnerability, delete key material first, then you can exploit that device. So other components could be audio devices, could be keyboards, could be mice, any sort of peripheral could be running Linux. Now, what I did find is that a lot of webcams do run Linux, and Mickey and Jesse talked about this in their talk, that there's others that are going kind of under the microscope, if you will, that run Linux that could be, have the potential to enable the weaponization of that device.
But that is sort of a prerequisite, is there has to be something that's running Linux on it. You have to have something to work with.
Yes. So a couple of prerequisites. So, obviously in order for an attacker to infect it has to be physically connected to the PC.
Mm-hmm.
That device has to run Linux. The third requirement is 2 parts. Either the device and or firmware update process does not validate the firmware signature or authenticity, which means I can put any software or firmware I want on the device with no guardrails. The second similar scenario is it does do some type of firmware validation, but there's a bypass and or exploit or something wrong. The control vault's a great example, right? They did do some type of firmware security. However, Cisco Talos researchers figured out that through a vulnerability, it leaked some of the key material that allowed you to, I believe, if I read between the lines, assign your own firmware and then put your own firmware on the device.
Paul, you said it has to be physically connected. Is there any chance of doing this over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi?
Potentially. Some of the cameras that, like we have here in studio, for example, have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on them. So like the OBS bot Tail Air, for example, I'm HDMI connected to that, but it can also USB connect. But also these cameras have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on them. My little remote control for my camera talks over Bluetooth. The Wi-Fi allows the software to interface with the Wi-Fi to get network access, so I can control the camera through software. So theoretically, if there were vulnerabilities in any open port services on Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth, or vulnerabilities in the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth stack, as an attacker, I could compromise the cameras remotely. for sure. Also, I'm theorizing, and we haven't tested this, that if you have a Windows PC, let's say, you've got a Linux webcam attached to it, and that Linux webcam has Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth, or really any other hardware, right? If I, as an attacker, can control the operating system and firmware for that device, I could very well enable Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth attacks, reconnaissance, and use those for whatever I need to. Which it's kind of interesting. So that's one attack path is remote, right? The second attack path is I get one of these cameras. I actually had one of the vulnerable cameras. I don't have it here in the studio, but you can see pictures in the blog post. That the second one is I infect the webcam offline, and then I send it to Sam or Jeff. I'm like, hey guys, here's a free webcam. Here you go, and they take it and plug it in. Now the byproduct of that also is that if I send it to Jeff and then Jeff goes, I don't really like this, I want to give it to Sam. Now Sam's PC ends up infected by the webcam. So you can just pass. I mean, similar to a USB thumb drive, I suppose, same kind of thing.
Well, when we talked about Run Zero, people were saying they have 88 IoT devices on their home network. All those devices, in principle, could be attacked this way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, correct. But a lot of those devices are standalone on the network, right? The interesting thing about this is it's a peripheral connected to a PC, direct over USB. So reliable to flash the firmware because it's already connected and powered right over USB. And what the other interesting thing about this is that the ability for an attacker to kind of hide and have that stealth and persistence on a webcam, an attached device. So I'm not, as an attacker, hanging out in the operating system. I'm hanging out on the peripheral. And when opportunity strikes, I might interface with the operating system and then I go away. If someone were to detect that behavior, they might wipe the PC and reinstall it. And look, in this scenario, you could wipe the operating system. You could wipe the entire hard drive completely. You could wipe the spy flash with UEFI and put a whole brand new UEFI in there. Do the same for every other component that runs firmware on your system. But if you don't pay attention to the webcam, when your system comes back online, I can program the webcam to go, oh yeah, just reinfect it. Just reinfect it. The demo that Mickey has, the webcam is running a interpreter session. And it does some fancy things where Mickey actually programmed it to behave like not just a webcam, but have a mode where it behaved like a USB HID device and a network device over RNDIS. I can't remember what RNDIS stands for, but essentially enables networking over USB on Windows systems. So once you enable that, you can then telnet. So the example firmware I had, I could, as an attacker, telnet from the victim PC over the USB RNDIS connection to the web camera on an IP address. And so I could just telnet and then it would drop me into a root shell, and then I could live there. So Mickey did figure out like those networking things.
Yeah, I think there's a market for antivirus companies to offer some kind of testing for the integrity of your connected peripherals.
Yeah.
Like your router
connected peripherals are kind of like it's fair game. There's not much out there that is protecting these peripherals.
Well,
but just like you have antivirus signatures, you could have some kind of signature for the firmware on those devices and test to see if they match the signature. It doesn't seem impossible.
Right.
Well, and in my day job world, the number one peripheral is what we would call a card reader. And I'd be curious as to anybody that's taking a look at those or is planning on taking a look at those. Historically, they're running stripped down, like Windows embedded or something like that. But in modern times, I wouldn't be surprised if there's newer ones out there that they haven't flipped over to some flavor of Linux. I've always been curious for the 20 years I've been doing this. Why isn't anybody looking at the peripherals?
At the card readers. Yeah. Well, it could be. So I got curious just based on the peripherals connected to my PC at home. And I have an audio device. And so I dug around. I found the firmware to the audio device. and I think I tried to unblob it. And then I have a Claude session that helps me reverse engineer firmware. And I use the term reverse engineer very lightly. It can tell me stuff about the firmware that would normally like manually take me a lot more time, but it basically can string together a bunch of tools and techniques and run those. And again, Sam, this is your point on LLMs, right? It knows what we've done in the past. It's basically just helping me automate that. So I've used that effectively. Go, hey, like there's this weird firmware. I'm not familiar with it at all. Do whatever you need to do to just tell me something about it. And when I ran that audio device, it said it's running some operating system and or microcode. I think it actually was microcode, not a full OS, that is common in audio gear and is very specific to that. Now, not to say there are not vulnerabilities there, but I'm like, whoa, like timeout. This isn't an ARM processor and this is not Linux. Like this is a research project for another time. However, you start popping firmware and looking under the covers for some other peripherals, such as webcams, you will find like, oh, look at that. They run Linux and mostly ARM processors. And if you can dig a little further, you can almost do some validation by looking at it and go, like, I think I told Claude or asked Claude, do you see any evidence in here? It was able to like, unblob the file system and the bootloader and the kernel. And I was like, hey, go look through all that stuff and tell me if you've got any evidence of any kind of secure boot implementation or any kind of firmware encryption. And it'll come back and it'll be like, nope. And then if you can get UART on it, you can get the boot up sequence. And then you take that output and you put it through an LLM. And you're like, hey, in this U-boot boot up sequence, is there any indication of those firmware security controls? And the ones I've looked at all said no. But that needs to be validated first, obviously.
What Jeff said made me think ATM machines are basically a computer with a webcam and a mag card reader. They seem like that would be a high-value target, and I doubt they're verifying any of that firmware.
Yeah, it's a great point. In other device, I didn't consider this. I'm glad you guys are here, right? It's in great insights. I hadn't considered that these special purpose devices may also be susceptible, and that may be even more of a reason why attackers may want to be more stealthy. I think on a regular Windows PC, like I see attackers using this, yes, but again, I'm very close to it. I'm excited about it. I kind of want to see it used in the wild, which is a terrible thing to say. Like I don't want to see defenders struggle with this, right? But I'm kind of excited because it's so cool to see this in the wild. But on like a regular Windows PC, I think attackers already have a lot of places to hide. Now, do I think that's shrinking? Perhaps, right? Like, yeah, defender may not be the best at catching or not being susceptible to evasion. Some of the more larger EDR vendors are a little harder to evade, but attackers are still having a field day without having to hide in a peripheral device. However, I could see this being very beneficial to certain attackers and potentially becoming more mainstream.
Well, and I don't want to give anybody ideas, but in the PCI world, a lot of merchants have graduated or evolved to the point where they're using card readers where all the data coming off the credit card is being encrypted right in that peripheral card reader device. And I think the average attacker doesn't bother with it anymore. They've moved on to other things, but if there is a proof of concept out there where there is an attack vector to get at these peripheral devices, all they have to do then is figure out how to inject some sort of malware that does the skimming, because the card data is being read into memory and being encrypted, so it's there.
Right, it's there.
However, briefly, if they could figure out some way to skim it and exfiltrate it effectively, or just harvest it for a while and then come back later and collect it. I mean, it would be a very targeted attack, and you're only going to get as many cards as that specific reader. But if it's reproducible and you can infiltrate, it still sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds feasible. And there really is very little in the way of the data security standard that talks about looking at things like a peripheral device. It's always been sort of it's there. make sure all your ports are accounted for on your on your PC, which is your point of sale, your cash register. So I assume
I think there's
Calypsium's not going to do anything unless they get hired to look at it, right?
well, not necessarily.
Okay.
There is still research happening, which is good. But and I think it's interesting the similar research to this that it hides in peripherals, right? We talked about the control vault one, but also there is the talk from last year on option ROMs, right? Kazuki from FFRI Security, something like that, right? Japanese security researcher, showed how, like, basically you can put a piece of code on a peripheral device like a PCI network card. In early boot phase, UEFI will go, hey, I need some help loading whatever you are peripheral device. Like, can you give me some help with that? That's called an option ROM, and it'll pass it over. And so that's also kind of hiding in the hardware. Now we're seeing this research come out in conferences like Black Hat and DEF CON. And so I think in the life cycle of vulnerabilities and techniques, we're kind of early. Usually what that means is as we shift and attackers' needs shift and we get more, we get better at perfecting these techniques, it starts to see adoption. I don't know.
Excuse me for a second, Paul. Are you setting fire to your drink with a blowtorch?
Oh, yes, I am. So this is a smoke infuser.
Portable smoker.
Yeah, it's a little portable cocktail smoker. So you put the little wood in there, and then you set fire to the wood, and then you cap it off, and you kind of just let the smoke infuse your drink. Yeah.
Wow.
It's one of the things I do live on the air for the show.
There we go. And I've got one of those too that I picked up earlier this year.
Nice.
There was a guy at B-Sides that had one that was electronic. It was almost like a little.
Oh yeah, I have one of those too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
like basically just a fan that pulls air in, and then blows it out a tube into like a glass, similar to what. Yeah, go ahead.
At DEF CON, I saw DT, and he said he was drinking penicillin. And he explained to me that, like there's martinis, there's a whole universe of penicillin drinks that taste like medicine, I guess. And he's going through them all.
I don't know that I want to drink penicillin.
He was handing out penicillin. I didn't try it, but it's the new thing, apparently.
Is it actually penicillin, or is it a drink that tastes like penicillin?
I think so, yeah. It's a type of drink like a martini somehow. I guess it tastes like medicine. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure why we would do that to ourselves, but maybe we've acquired a taste of medicine in our old age. And
it makes as much sense as putting smoke through it, I would think.
Right?
Well, most of our favorite drinks started out as medicine, so maybe it's full circle.
It's very true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so speaking of Black Hat and DEF CON, briefly, how did you guys enjoy the conferences? What were some of the highlights and takeaways?
I'll let Sam go first. He was squirreled away the whole week.
Yeah, I hardly went to DEF CON at all. The first day, the Wi-Fi was down, so I panicked, and I spent like the whole first day trying to reconfigure my printing workshop to survive without Wi-Fi. And thankfully, that turned out not to be necessary. They fixed it. But I was just distracted by my training course, so I hardly went to anything.
So what were you teaching, Sam?
Basic hacking for beginners, so 4 whole courses, basic pen testing, then incident response, exploit development, machine learning, some operational technology security they asked for, things like that.
And you did that through DEF CON?
Yeah. 4-day training, paid training at DEF CON. They're apparently competing with Black Hat. This was the first 4-day class, and people seem pretty happy, so I think there will be more.
Good for you, Sam. I love that.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually aware of that. I went out, B-Sides is where I traditionally start, and they changed the format of B-Sides this year. They added a day. So B-Sides ran for 2.5 days, Monday, Tuesday, half day, Wednesday. They still did their pool party Wednesday night. So I went, I flew out on Sunday. So it was a day earlier than usual, which kind of threw me for a couple days. But I did B-Sides for 1 day. The second day I went over to something called SquadCon, which is put on by Black Girls Hack. So it's a conference for the underserved community within our community. If I may tell one brief story, I was talking to a lady that I met there that was basically a speaker wrangler. It was at the Sahara, so I had to travel to get to it. It was a whole 2 miles away from everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to this lady, and she kind of stopped me. I guess she picked up on the fact that I was, an older, well-seasoned person, and she was looking for mentoring opportunities and ideas. She's breaking into cybersecurity. She started out her life as a school teacher, and later got into software development, but she was telling me she's really into cybersecurity. She really loves it. She loves red teaming and pen testing. So I was giving her the usual kind of tips and advice. Somewhere along the line, she mentioned she was from Philadelphia. So I'm like, oh, do you know Jess Hoffman? You're the host of CISO Stories. And she'd met her, but she didn't really know her. But I said, well, that's somebody you need to get in touch with. And of course, she said she was from Philadelphia. So I said, oh, my dad grew up in Philadelphia. He graduated from Simon Gratz High School. And I just mentioned that to just sort of give a context of geography. And she lit up and she said, that's where I used to teach. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting. So I've been in touch with her, and she wants to give a talk. So I'm going to try to help mentor her and get her to the point where she can give a talk. We're targeting B-Sides Philly, which I think is in November, which it's her local B-Sides. So that would be cool. So that was SquadCom. Awesome. Yeah, it was kind of a fun. I had lots of little, fun encounters with people. I wasn't speaking at all last week. People kept asking me, where are you speaking? I'm not speaking. You're not speaking? I said, no, I'm just kind of here to take it all in. So I had a chance to just talk to people. Went back to B-Sides, then I went over to do the Black Hat thing and, take advantage of some of the Black Hat parties and so on and so forth. I've got a picture of one of the interviews I did, because I guess I can say it now. It's past tense. I had the media pass for Black Hat, even though we weren't supposed to get it, but they asked me personally if I would like to come, the media people. So I'm like, okay, I guess they don't associate me with Cyber Risk Alliance. So I went ahead and got it. So I got a chance to catch up with the CEO of Qualys, who, we interviewed Sumedh some years ago. So got a chance to catch up with him. Of course, I was hanging out with Ron Gula from Tenable at some point, and Julian Watts, who's one of the senior executives at Rapid7. So I kind of covered that whole
the vulnerability management,
our little vulnerability management space. And then and as I said, I just sort of did LobbyCon at DEF CON just to take it all in. My observation between the contrast of the Black Hat DEF CON, two ends of Vegas type of thing was, AI was all the talk and all the rage at Black Hat. Everybody had their AI, powered AI centric stuff, lots and lots of talks on AI and agentic AI. And then I went to DEF CON, and of course there was a lot of focus on AI there, but from a different perspective. And I was thinking, AI at the beginning of the week was amazing. There's so much stuff out there, and AI is just changing the world. I even had the thought, at some point, I think AI is like keeping a lot of these security companies in business and keep giving them something to talk about. Otherwise, it's just kind of ho-hum security products, security tools. Then you get to DEF CON, and it was amazing too, and how many people were breaking AI and figuring out ways to exploit the AI. So it was an interesting contrast. But I saw
this image. You ever see the image where it's like this fictitious kind of machine, and then there's this one little part that's supporting the whole thing, and usually it says like one open source developer maintaining one package is like right here. And so the image I saw was this wedge, and the wedge went in and tilted the whole machine, to one side, and the wedge was labeled AI. I was like, oh, that is perfect.
That is perfect. That
sums it up nicely.
And there was the whole spectrum of people that are really figuring out how to use AI and leverage it in security products. You can imagine it has more to do with logging and monitoring and threat hunting and being able to just sort through the way too much data that we generate these days. And I can see that. But then you go over to DEF CON and you find out how brittle and fragile and exploitable it still is. I also walked around DEF CON. I love the atmosphere of DEF CON. I don't know what the count was on attendance. I did get a follow-up email from the media people of Black Hat today. They said they had 20,000. I would guess that DEF CON was probably more like 30,000. But just walking around the convention center, which is huge, people hate that it's there. I like it because it's all in one place. At least you have the opportunity to get to see everything. Whereas in years past, I'd come home from DEF CON and somebody'd be talking about some village. I'd be like, well, where was that? Oh, it was in Planet Hollywood. There was something in Planet Hollywood. I was bouncing back and forth between Bally's and Paris and Caesars and so on. But I had the thought walking around DEF CON thinking, if civilization is going to be saved, it's going to come from DEF CON. It's going to come from the people here that are, that care about society and care about the sort of the bigger picture. Not like Black Hat, where it just seems like everybody's just trying to sell.
I love that insight so much, Jeff. I really do, because I get that. But I wasn't able to attend this year. I hope to get out there next year, although I said that last year. But I do want to get back out to DEF CON, because even like an observer from the outside looking in, like I can feel the vibe, right? Because it gets some press coverage. We communicate in a back channel chat, and I can kind of see what you guys are doing. I can go on like Spotify and find a DEF CON 33 playlist, and that's the music I would hear in the background if I was there. And then I can read about the talks and follow on social media and see what everyone's doing. I'm like, wow, it has such a really awesome hacker vibe to it, right? That's what I love about DEF CON.
It really does.
Right. It is. If you're going to save the world, it's going to be the hackers at DEF CON.
Oh, absolutely.
Do it. Yeah.
And I love that. I experienced this more last year when I actually went into every village and was able to hang out, but I was still feeling it this year. There's so many people there that are new. This is their first DEF CON. I mean, that's probably a quarter to a third of the people every year. Everybody that's there to learn, and they're just trying to soak things in, and there's just a lot of enthusiasm from that perspective. But then the people in all the villages that are teaching and trying to share their little piece of stuff, they're equally as enthusiastic. People eager to learn, people eager to teach. What more could you ask for?
Right.
And this past week, as I've been seeing people posting, mostly on LinkedIn, because I can't keep up with all the other social media platforms.
LinkedIn's been a great social platform, and people can fight me on that. I think it's pretty great.
Well, I call it the de facto, because at least, no matter what people are doing, most people are also on LinkedIn. But I saw somebody post, this was their 30th DEF CON, and they really think it might be their last. They were kind of disillusioned at everything was more expensive. Vegas is expensive. It's huge, the lines and so on and so forth. But then I was reading as many, if not, that was one example, but I was reading several more posts from people, some of whom I just met for the first time, that were just so excited. It was their first DEF CON. They learned so much. It was amazing. And I thought, it's, if you're going to DEF CON just to try to learn, it might be after 30 years, you might have learned everything that you're going to learn, other than, new technologies and new techniques, but the overall learning, you might have run its course. I mean, I've debated whether I'm going to, when I'm going to stop going to DEF CON, but then I went and I'm like, oh, I'm not here to learn. I'm here to impart knowledge, ask questions.
Well, it's
get
about
people
making
directed.
connections and
Yeah.
having experiences and communicating and hanging out with your peers. That there's a lot of benefits to a conference, especially the one as large as DEF CON. Sam,
Well-
when was your first DEF CON? Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. ThreatLocker's zero trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots, just proactive, built for now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock.
I'm thinking must be about 25 years ago.
Wow.
And, I think one constant at DEF CON is that every single DEF CON we've been to, there's a bunch of people saying, gee, it sucks now. It was great long
I
ago.
agree.
It's all real. That's
Right.
just a standard thing at DEF CON because it keeps
I've
changing,
heard
of
that.
course. And it
Yeah,
keeps
I've
getting
heard that.
bigger. Yeah.
For the past 20 years, I've certainly heard that, but I also appreciate the spirit that was like very early DEF CON 1 through 5. That the story behind it is pretty amazing. Like, you just wanted a bunch of hackers to hang out in Vegas, and I get that. Like, back then, Vegas was, you could do it. You could stay at a cheap hotel. You could get a cheap flight. You could go to the $5 buffet. You could find the hotel or sleazy casino that had the $1 pitcher of beer, right? You could do it you could kind of hack your way and do it on the cheap. And I think DEF CON, a lot of conferences kind of benefited from that over the years until, I don't know, probably before the pandemic, but certainly after the pandemic. You look at the prices in Vegas and even a lot of other major cities, and you're like, whoa, what? There is no cheap way around that. I remember I was a teaching assistant to John Strand at some juncture in my career where I was not like financially very well off, in between jobs, just starting out on Security Weekly, like something like that. And I was like, oh shit, I don't have like a big company that is going to fund my Vegas trip. Now I got to do it on the cheap. And I figured out a way to do it. I'm like, I'll stay at Tuscany. I'm like, I won't even take a cab. I don't even know if there was Ubers back then, but I'm like, I'll walk to Caesars in the morning because it's not that hot. Right. And I'll find the breakfast at Caesars that, is the cheapest thing for like a coffee and, a banana and a muffin or whatever. Like, actually wasn't that bad at this one spot that I had found. Right. And so you can kind of, hack your way. Now forget it, man. Now everything is so expensive in Las Vegas.
But there's still a way to do it.
You could go to your local B-sides. That's all. I wouldn't go to DEF CON if you're poor. I'd go to the local one. Now there's cons everywhere. I
totally agree. Yeah. There's cons there,
Yeah, there's that. But I mean, I take advantage of the fact, although I really didn't take advantage of it, but get invited to the parties, the networking events, especially the black hat related ones. They'll feed you. And, even though it's hors d'oeuvres and finger food, the food in Vegas is pretty darn good. They don't exist. I
will say though, Jeff, because I know that you do this and many of us do it. If you do go to a party, it's hosted by a vendor, at least spend 5 or 10 minutes talking to someone about what the vendor does, where they're located, who works there, what's your product do, who just ask the basic questions and learn about the reason they're spending all that money on a party is largely for brand awareness, right? Like, I don't think it's a lead. I think it's for brand awareness. So if you do go to a party, I probably should have said this before, but if you're going to other vendor events, spend the time and just 5 or 10 minutes of your time, right? That vendor's paying for your drinks and some appetizers or food. Spend some time and just ask them the basic questions and get to know that vendor.
Which it depends on the party, because some of the vendors, I mean, like the Rapid 7 party. You remember the Rapid 7
what Rapid
party.
7 did. Yeah,
I went to the Rapid 7 party this year, and it was actually extremely scaled back, but they still kind of took over Border Grill and Mandalay, so it's kind of Mexican, Southwestern type food. but it turned out that this restaurant has 2 stories, and the basement level spills out to where the pool is.
Yeah.
And Julian had made sure they set up a smoking area, and
Nice.
Julian had a box of Rapid 7 cigars. They apparently, one of their employees has a cigar shop on the side, and it was a box of hand rolled cigars that this guy that works for Rapid 7 had rolled.
I need to get one because it needs to go next to my Tenable Nessus cigar, which I think I still have one, intact with the band on and everything.
I'll message Julian and see if he can squirrel one away.
And then Qualis needs to make a cigar, and I need to have
that's right, the trifecta,
the VM trifecta 3-pack of cigars.
There you go. But I mean, it wasn't nearly the Rapid 7 party that it was in the past. But there's other vendors that do the same type of thing. And I've been to them, but when they get too big, I'm kind of like, how do you have any kind of quality conversation? I kind of wonder why.
I think that's why a lot of it. I remember the Rapid 7 party years ago. I had all the glow sticks on me, and I was like 7 Red Bull and vodkas deep, dancing to techno from a DJ or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of them do not cater themselves to having a quality conversation with just about anybody. Yet alone the vendor. But
it's then it's just really top of the funnel kind of brand stuff. But
it's just brand stuff.
I do want to transition, just in the interest of time, Jeff, talk about AI for a moment. I know Sam and I had a couple of stories. You were mentioning AI in the context of like, it was the big thing at Black Hat that people were like, oh, AI is going to be the savior for the world. And then DEF CON was more of the, we can break AI 6 ways to Sunday. And the answer is somewhere in between. My story number 8 is titled, I Built an AI Hacker. It Failed Spectacularly. Now, look, the details of what was built, when and how it failed is important. But in this context, in this lens, I think what's super important, and props to the author, by the way, for putting this together and sharing it. This was Romy, and this was Ultra Red. They're a vendor. And good for you for putting out a post that didn't talk about, I didn't even know this was a vendor post till I just looked. So props to you for community posting. But the thing that struck me is that I think we're approaching the point. Now, there was some stuff in Romy's experiment that worked, and there's some stuff that didn't work. Again, the important thing is there was some stuff that worked, because I think we're approaching a point. You guys can fight me on this, please do, where we're able to build our own tooling using AI and LLMs to enhance and assist with many security tasks, such as scanning, pen testing, attack surface monitoring, where we maybe don't need to go to the vendor community to get a solution for that. Because what Romy was kind of describing was, I want to use AI. I wanted to go find all the bad things in my network, on my systems, and then report back to me without me having to do a whole bunch of manual work. Well, that turns out there are vendors that have been working for like the entire existence of cybersecurity to build just that, because AI is not in and of itself as a standalone concept is not new, right? LLMs are slightly new, but I think we're reaching a point where I, as an individual, could perhaps train my own model, build my own model, use agents and all the fancy terminology that like sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. I think we're approaching a point where I can build my own tool set that maybe supplements and or replaces what I might go pay a lot of money for another company to do. Sam's already shaking his head no.
I am, because I lived through this. When I worked at I came from scientific programming. All my software was custom. And when I worked at a financial company, the boss came over and saw me writing code, and he said, no. Don't write anything custom. Figure out how to do it with Microsoft Office, because that will be more sustainable and everything. And, the hobbyists can always make a version of something, and then you've got technical debt. Now you have to support it. And usually for 99% of companies, you just want to buy a commercial solution so somebody else is putting on the patches and the updates and all that.
But I'd argue that 99% of companies definitely lean towards and adopt commercial software and air quotes solutions. However, the trend that I've seen in the past 20 years is looking at what's a couple of factors, right? Like what's most important to the business, what commercial offerings exist to do that, what limitations do they have, what maintenance am I going to have to implement, even though it's a commercial solution, I still have some kind of maintenance. Whereas, and then if this one is important enough to the business in this scenario, I want to take it in-house and I want to maintain my own code. And there's a lot of companies that, if they're smart about it, they do that judiciously. You can't do that for everything. I can't go look at my security stack and go, I'm going to replace every single tool with open source and stuff I build myself. I mean, unless you have a massive team, like I'm pretty sure even the Google and Microsofts of the world don't even do this, although they do it more because they have more resources. But like every other company, you may have things that you want to own on your own. I'm going to maintain this as my own internal software, but I'm going to rely on commercial software and MSSPs and third parties and consultants or whatever, service companies to do this other part because I really want to focus on this one. And you, like I said, Sam, you can't do that all the time, right? You got to be like, this is the factors that play into it are mission critical, super important to the business. What's commercially available is a double-edged sword, solves some problems, but also breeds some other problems. So I'm going to bring it on my own.
Well, it's funny that you.
Go ahead.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Paul, because one of the things that I don't like about going to Black Hat is the constant focus on everybody's selling to the enterprise, and I'm like, there's only so many enterprise companies out there that can afford to buy any of these things. I had the same thought when I walked the floor at RSA, but the advancement of AI and ML and the ability to use that and leverage it even for writing code, perhaps, maybe is going to make some of the quote unquote solutions more accessible to small, mid-sized businesses, other businesses that aren't necessarily enterprise caliber, at least don't have enterprise type budgets where they can afford to go out and buy all this stuff. So maybe, just maybe, all these security solutions become more accessible to more companies because of the decrease in cost. Yes, there's technical debt, but in theory, why are we doing any of this stuff? Because it's makes things cheaper or more opportunity to make money. So I didn't see any specific
the
company
problem with
that's
that, though,
focused on that. Go ahead.
The problem with that is capitalism and greed, where I learned very early on, maybe even when I was getting my degree in business, that if you run a company and you're doing something and it costs you X, right, and you're charging Y for that,
right?
If you decrease your costs in X, you don't necessarily decrease your price in
There
Y.
is that greed factor.
Right? There is that greed. So wait, we can do this more efficiently and cheaply. Well, we're not lowering our prices, right? We're just making more money because we need to show that to our shareholders.
Right.
And in today's economy, I truly believe that's a huge thing, that companies are trying to save money to increase their margins. Now, that being said,
but there's also that old saying, we can make it up in volume.
Right. And it's exactly where I was going, Jeff. If we say, well, maybe now our costs are less to make a version for the small business market, maybe we can have an offering there because we can reduce our overhead and make something that's affordable for the smaller business market. And maybe it's not as good. It relies on AI a little more. It's got false positives and negatives, but we can make a product that hopefully helps improve the security posture of small businesses and gives us enough margins that we can make that available to them affordably. That could be a likely scenario.
Well, and to me, the key has always been to focus, as the vendor selling the solution, focus on the companies like the MSSPs that do rely on spreading it out,
the wide net,
the wide net, and making it up in volume. I mean, I've been advocating for that in the PCI world as the PCI landscape has shifted away from the merchant to the service provider, and so many companies are, minimizing their PCI responsibility by outsourcing to third parties. Well, somebody's got to secure the third parties, and that's where a lot of the convergence happens. A lot of MSPs, a lot of we can do it for you. So I'm mildly optimistic that maybe that's a positive that comes out of it, with a healthy dose of cynicism because of capitalism and greed.
Right. Sam, what's your take on chatbots? Right, AI chatbots.
Well, I mean, they're the universal application right now. And the thing that really bothers me is something I learned a couple of weeks ago, that the number one use of them is therapy and companionship. That is really bad. And
Yeah,
like
you had was this a Wired article that chatbots go into a delusional spiral?
Yeah, I might be wired. I forget where it is, but it certainly is very interesting. This is something I think people don't appreciate, is that even if you're highly educated and intelligent, that does not protect you from going nuts. And this guy just started talking to his chatbot, and it started out normal. And then one day he mentioned, "Oh, I had this idea for an encryption algorithm." And he's not a mathematician or anything. He doesn't really know much. He just had an idea. But it probably doesn't mean anything. The chatbot says, "You undervalue yourself. It's probably really great." He said, "No, I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree." He said, "You're probably great." But then like a few weeks, it had him convinced that he had super magic powers and he could levitate, and that the spies were hunting him.
Wow.
The thing is, people think I would never do that. But nobody is safe. If you don't have somebody checking you, if you don't have some contact with the real world for feedback to keep you humble, you can easily fall into this crazy stuff. And I think that's the big danger with these chatbots. I mean, people use them as an emotional connection. They are terrible at that. And this is the fundamental thing people keep on misunderstanding about them. You think you're talking to something with intelligence, but you are not. There was the guy writing code we talked about where he wrote terrible code. And he said, "That code is no good." And it gives you an apology letter. It's like you have a book of form letters. If you complain, it'll give you the form letter apologizing, but it didn't learn anything. It doesn't remember what it promised to do. Then it'll do the same thing wrong again. And it'll give you the apology again. And you say, "What's going on here? I'm not really communicating with an intelligent being that is listening to me and obeying my orders." And you aren't. It just looks like that.
So who trained these chatbots in the first place to be sympathetic to the user?
They just learn. They don't have any sympathy. They don't have any emotions. They don't understand anything. Just they found a chat somewhere on Reddit where somebody talked like that. And when you talk like that, they'll give you whatever the guy said when people talked like that on the internet. It's just what you get if you Googled and took the top 10 hits and averaged them.
It's like a really complex if statement.
Really complex what?
If statement. Right? Conditional statement.
That's right. That's right. I mean,
right? It's like, I learned a whole bunch of stuff on how to talk like really empathetic to someone. And then something in a prompt triggers that and goes, "Oh, I know based on what I learned that I can speak that way," and just pulls all that stuff in. So it's like a conditional statement like, "Oh, if I see a signal that I need to have empathy, then I can just pull from this whole huge data set."
Well, it's worse than that. It doesn't have any concept of empathy. It just echoes whatever you put in. So if you start talking like a pirate,
regurgitating what it thinks is empathy.
If you start talking like you're in a science fiction story, it'll echo stuff it found in a science fiction story or a Harry Potter story.
It's kind of like a social engineering thing. I've heard this in social engineering context that you relate to the person by speaking their language and getting enthralled and engaged with the topic that they're talking about, even if it's something off the wall. In a corporate setting, it's having me talking to someone and they mention music and guitar play, and then I can pull on this whole thread and relate to them. The most effective social engineers have that in their toolbox, right? Being able to relate to someone, right? And that's really all it's doing on an if condition statement is, I can relate to you. If you're on this topic, I know a lot about that topic because I was trained on that. My model has information on that topic. Yeah.
Now, it's the ultimate echo chamber, and people have, Stanford prison experiment showed this. People conform to their group. So if your whole group is doing something, you just do what brings approval in the group. And this thing will just offer you approval for everything, no matter how crazy it is. So pretty soon you're off in Crazy Town.
Oh, if you want to be terrified, go watch the documentary on the Stanford prison experiment. Gone horribly wrong. That was, wow. That was. I'm laughing because it was just so horrific. Laughter is almost like a coping mechanism of what I watched in that documentary.
Well, and when was that? That was like in the early 70s.
Yeah, I think it was
older
70s
when they did it. The most
Yeah.
amazing thing to me about those experiments, and we're speaking as if everybody knows what it is, go Google it and find out. It's how quickly it devolved, because the thing was set up to last for several weeks, and they had to pull the plug within like 3 days or something like that. It was so bad.
It turned ugly people turned ugly really fast. I think it's one of the most fascinating sociological and psychological experiments ever. Unfortunately,
Well,
people
I
are
think
kind of scarred
parents
from that.
know this, right? If your kids start hanging around bad kids and picking up bad habits, it affects them really fast. We are social animals. We conform to the group. We don't really have much in the way of absolute principles. We pretty much just do whatever is expected in our group.
It's true.
Well, not to go too off on a tangent, one more thought on this. One of the people I had a chance to run into is Perry Carpenter. He works for KnowBe4. We interviewed him, I think, on Security and Compliance Weekly a couple years ago. It was fascinating because he specializes in social engineering, but when we had talked to him a couple years ago, he had recently been tested positive, I don't know what the right term is, for having autism. And he talked a lot about how, he does not intuitively know how to respond to people, given their emotions and given what they're saying, given their circumstances. He's had to train himself. And it's an interesting, this would be an interesting research project. Maybe I'll take it up sometime. But the fact that so many of us are on the autism scale and even before we say that, we're all socially awkward in our hacker community. And yet we're the ones that are building all these chatbots and training these engines, and they're learning to pick up on the things we've just been talking about in terms of the social engineering. That's one of the perceived areas where AI has an immediate impact, is in helping with the social engineering and the phishing attack simulations, or using them, as from the bad guy perspective.
Like
fascinating
socially though, I mean, we could talk about the social interactions of hackers and people in technology for a long time, but socially, like, how do you feel about someone that brings a printer and a full desktop computer into a Starbucks? Like,
I've seen them.
There is some kind of social interact. We've seen it, right? We've all seen it. The person that brought way too much equipment to the local coffee shop, right? Starbucks.
Usually they're the day traders. I'm there really early in the morning, and the day traders are there with their own monitor and stuff,
Yeah. So the problem apparently is so bad in South Korea that South Korean Starbucks had to issue a statement to say, like, we do, like, they did the corporate thing. Oh, we welcome everyone. We want you to be in our environment. Because, like, look, it's about their bottom line. Starbucks knows if you're hanging out in a Starbucks all day, you're going to keep ordering drinks and coffee all day long, right? So they want you there.
There is WeWork for that. You could rent an office space. And if
that costs money,
Starbucks,
buying Starbucks costs money too, Sam. So
but I mean, I would assume they would if I was there, I would just say, state your price. You want $10 an hour? So let me do this.
Right. No, it's true. Flipping it on its head, Sam. I love that. Like, Starbucks should just be like, hey, if you want to hang out here with your desktop and your printer, you got to give us like $50 a day.
Right.
Well, they have to hang out here.
Yeah, but in their business model, they don't really have enough room for that. They'd have to turn into WeWork and have more little cubicles and stuff, Yeah. And I don't think that turned out to be a valuable business model. They're saying they don't want to get in that business.
Well, yeah, okay. I just think it's hilarious. Well, also hilarious that people bring like their full printer and desktop, and we've all seen the memes, but also, like, working from home and working from Starbucks are not the same thing. You're more susceptible. I mean, we talked about this 20 years ago or more, that if you really wanted to breach a company, one of the ways that rarely is in scope for pen testers is you go figure out who the high-ranking officers are in the company, and you're like, where do they live? Where's the closest Starbucks? And then you go. There's lots of tools, tactics, and techniques that you can use as a sanctioned penetration tester or malicious threat actor to go, I'm going to hang out here because I think that's where that person hangs out. I know some indicators or marks of how to find that person, how to find their devices. Maybe they posted a picture on social media. They've got a MacBook and they look this way. And I know that person using that MacBook, blah, 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 right? And compromise them that way. So like
just look at the screen.
Yeah, just look at the screen. Yeah, so
I mean, this happened
shoulder surf, good old fashioned shoulder
surf. A few weeks
surfing.
ago, this happened to Matt Gates. He was on his phone on an airplane, and the person behind him just made a movie through the crack of all these text messages and put it on the internet. You can all read it.
Right.
Well, it's funny because I had a couple stories about some big breaches, and they all had to do with social engineering techniques where they defeated the help desk or wore down the help desk and found a quote unquote bypass. But I mean, that's just another extension. And I would say, Paul, it doesn't have to be a senior executive at a company. Just
I agree.
Pick the local Starbucks now that more and more of us are having to go back to an office or sandwich shop, lunchtime shop, and just camp out there as part of your physical penetration testing exercise and see what you can learn. I don't know how many people would pay for that, but it's certainly legitimate.
Yeah, but it's these techniques, I think, for initial access are going to be in play forever, right? Yep. You still need techniques that embed you in that organization that are the post. Carlos Perez was great about talking about post exploitation, really putting that in context early on. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of what it's about is post exploitation, because that initial access is the initial access is as easy as I have some money and I want to go buy it, right? That's the point we've gotten to where it's a commodity. But then it's like, then what do you do? Great article I had on replaying or being able to grab NTLM hashes, my story number 11. This was a company called, Jeff, they sponsored it one time. I want to say they're called Simulate, but I think it's Simulate. CYMULATE was the ones that did this research.
I vaguely
recognize that
them.
company, right?
Yep.
Yeah, CYMULATE. And I want to say before they were sponsoring, I said Simulate, and I think they were Simulate is how they pronounced it. Anyway, they're responsible for the research. Great proof of concept that shows basically zero-click NTLM hash disclosure. I don't often highlight a lot of Windows hackery, but like this one caught my mind. Like, that's actually pretty bad if we don't fix this. So, not sure how it's fixed, to be honest with you, but that was a good one.
Well, and these techniques. Well, I find it interesting that more and more the big breaches are, the initial attack vector is social engineering, talking people into changing the password without any kind of authentication, stuff like that. We're never going to defeat that with technical solutions.
Right. Correct.
So what else is there? Security awareness training, and it's got to be something. I mean, one of my biggest beefs with the KnowBe4 is if you fail the phish test because you clicked on a link, they immediately want you to click on a link to go take the remedial testing. In fact, I probably shouldn't pick on my own company, but someone in my company recently sent me an email saying, "Hey, we have a client that needs to do a background investigation." So it was our HR department. We need you to sign a waiver, an agreement that it's okay for them to do an additional background check. So this was an unsolicited email, and it came through. What is it? DocuSign? Is that the name of the?
Yep. DocuSign. Yep.
So it came, so it had the little banner. This is from an external email, external IP address, and it's saying, "Hey, could you do me a favor and go over and click on this document and sign this waiver so we can do this background investigation so you can keep doing work with a client." And I thought, this is, I know the person and I recognize the name, but it's coming from an external source. So I quick shot them an email and I said, "Hey, is this you?" And they said yes. And I responded, what is this about? And they said, well, all the details in the document. And that's where I kind of went off on them. And I'm like, you're sort of reinforcing a bad behavior that we're trying to defeat. You're asking me to do something that all of our security awareness training is telling me never to do. You might want to rethink your approach to this. But all this has to do with process and people and understanding non-technical elements of security, which keep going by the wayside. Nobody, that's just boring.
But Jeff, you did the right thing. You did the right thing in taking the time out and validating the request. And I've spoken about this analogy before. To prevent wrong side surgery, they actually do just that, and they actually call it a timeout. So before anything happens in a surgery procedure, and sometimes they take multiple timeouts, confirming the patient, the date of birth, what surgery they're doing, and where that surgery is being performed. And that helped curb wrong side surgery by an enormous, I forget what the percentage is, but there's studies that show it helped greatly. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty much the number one thing that we can do to defend against social engineering, is just remembering to take that time out. The difference being you're sitting at home and you're the only person in front of your laptop versus you're sitting in a procedure room with a bunch of your peers, like reminding, oh, we got to take a time out, and everyone's collaborating on the timeout. So if we can adopt that mindset to validate the request like you did, Jeff, that is enough to curb a large percentage of that social engineering attack.
Well, and that type of behavior is often not overtly rewarded or encouraged.
Yeah, I agree. Because it slows the process down.
And that's part of the problem.
We want to move fast, Jeff. We want to move fast.
But, how many times have you sat on an airplane and, they're going through all their checklists, and if you're sitting close enough to the front, you hear them going through all the checks, like wind shear alert. They're going through all the checks, and the pilot will go out and walk the plane. And it just seems so mundane, and yet it's so vital. And even though, 99.9 times out of 100, you're not going to see an issue, it still needs to be done. But the key problem is you've got to, in your organization, encourage it and promote it and say, yes, this is something that has to be done. This is vital. It would defeat all these social engineering attacks where all these large companies are.
But you got to do it all the time. I see it when I take a boat out. Like, do I have enough life jackets for everyone? And is the orange box on the boat, like, is the fire extinguisher charged? Are there flares? Do flares look okay? Is there a compass? Is there a whistle? What else? There's like documentation. There's like a checklist I go through every time I take a boat out. And they like encourage you to do that. Like, yes, we did it before you went out, but you should also do it just to, like, we're all double checking each other before we do anything that could cause financial harm, physical harm, or the like.
Well, and you're never going to see it on an RSA or a Black Hat, a vendor with a 30-foot booth that's 2-3 tiers promoting good behavior,
common sense and good behavior.
And that's part of the problem. That
we're the common sense and good behavior vendor. We should create a company.
We're just rewarding you for doing the right thing, even though it's boring and mundane. But it's so critical.
We're CSGB security, common sense and good behavior.
I think there's a market for it. This is security awareness training, like what KnowBe4 does. You could have a vendor in that space that has a different attitude, but everyone wants this goal, how to effectively improve your security. And doing it in a less punitive, less mechanical way might be more effective. You could start a company, or somebody could.
Segue into another article about the Flipper Zero, because it just keeps getting press. What do we do about vehicle security? So we theorized last week, because none of us apparently are cool enough or willing to admit we have access to this Flipper Zero firmware that can be used to intercept key fob rolling codes and unlock cars. Different from what we've learned in the past, there have been attacks against this. And if we theorized incorrectly, well, I don't know. What's been proven, maybe air quotes proven now, I'm skeptical of the whole thing. So like previously we said you'd need other hardware on your Flipper Zero to be able to conduct an attack against rolling code key fobs and vehicle security systems. The demos so after we published and recorded and published that episode, I saw demos on YouTube where people are doing it with just a Flipper Zero with no add-on hardware. This comes from multiple sources, and I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's applicable to all vehicles. There's lots of caveats here. One caveat that was presented by, is it Security Sasquatch? Whatever video I published in our internal chat thing, says that once you do this attack, the original key fob no longer functions to unlock your vehicle because it somehow messes with the rolling code sequence so much. Is that true, Sam? Sam, do you have insights into how that there's some reason why, right? Something that you've affected the acceptable rolling codes such that the key fob is invalid.
Right, it's the same thing with those RSA tokens. They're creating a series of pseudo-random numbers on the server, and you're creating it on the client. If somebody else manages to get in, now your client is off by one.
Right. I was going to say, it's probably a synchronization issue.
It is.
Yeah.
But I've seen multiple videos now of people doing this with just a Flipper Zero. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
I don't know about a Flipper Zero, but my story 5 says the UK government knows that people have been doing this since 2020 with known devices for several models, Hyundai, Kia, Mitsubishi, Nissan, and Genesis. And it's apparently well established that there's a vulnerability and there's a patch, and they charge like $60 to put the patch on your Hyundai car.
Yeah, I've heard that. Well, that was the case with the Kia Boys incidents where they were fixing the immobilizers. But it was more expensive than that. From what I remember, Sam, covering that story, because your immobilizer, slightly different technology, they were charging more money, like $200 or $300 to $500 to fix your immobilizer problem, because I think they had to implement new hardware. I'm wondering if the $50 for the key fob thing is just a firmware update, maybe on your key fob and your vehicle, that it's $50 versus new hardware, which carries a higher price tag.
Yeah, this article doesn't get technical, but it sounds like it's just a simple replay attack for these models, and they're probably upgrading to a rolling code. That's what the impression I get.
Oh, okay. We've seen where Flipper Zero can. If it's not a rolling code, that's an easy job for a Flipper Zero. Yeah. It's just I think it's the CC1101 radio that transmit in those sub-gigahertz frequencies. And if there's no rolling code, sure, you can. A Flipper has a CC1101 radio, which can capture and transmit sub-gigahertz communications. Yeah. And we see that if it's a car, fine. If it's the customer support button in the store, what do they call that? Customer request, whatever that's called. You push the button in the electrical aisle of a Home Depot, and then someone comes over to customer assistance. That's just sub-gigahertz RF transmission with no authentication. And so I've talked about on the show in the past, my friend Bob may not have done that in retail stores. You can make any one of those go off. You get a menu, or you can make all of them go off. Yeah. And if cars are using similar lacking security technologies, that's in play. This attack is, in fact, from what I understand, targeting rolling codes. I think it's only a matter of time before this gets out, right? Then we come back to, what do we do for vehicle security now?
Well, if you implement rolling codes correctly, then you wouldn't be able to defeat them, because there'd be strong encryption and a secret key that is not being transmitted. So, I mean, it can be done if you do the cryptography correctly. If they're breaking in, they must have made an error in the cryptography.
Well, and here's the thing. So that means
and you use cryptography very loosely in that description.
Yeah, but my thing is, the most recent and newest vehicles will have the most resilient technology against these attacks. But now let's put that in the lens of where the economy in the vehicle economy is here in the US. People are hanging on to their cars more than ever before, because new cars are so expensive. Sure. They're hanging on to their used cars. They're paying car mechanics exorbitant amounts of money, because they're like, it's still less than if I were to go out and buy even a used car. If you got a teenager that's getting ready to drive, like I do, I had to go out in the used car market. I'm like, holy crap. Like people are getting, now I know why when I talk to my local mechanic, she's like, we're super busy. Like in years past, she'd be like, look, someone with a 10, 20-year-old vehicle may be looking at thousands of dollars, maybe sub $5,000 worth of repairs. They would be like, all right, forget it. I'm just going to go buy a new car. She's like, now cars are so expensive. They're like, oh, it's $2,000. That's still cheaper than when I can go out and try and buy another car for it. So I might as well just stick with what I know. I've already put money into it. And so people are hanging on to their cars, which means, fast forward to the Flipper Zero story, these vulnerabilities are going to persist in cars that are in use today more so than ever before because people are hanging on to their cars. Much like if we were to hang on to our computers that support Windows 10 and never upgrading them or putting Linux on them. Now we're just sitting here vulnerable, which is bad.
Yeah, well, this is the whole OT security thing. You have long persisting devices, and in the computer world, you expect people to be constantly patching and updating, but nobody's going to do that at a power plant or an electric plant or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, the gaming PC market. They don't support their devices for as long, I think, because they know that their target demographic are PC enthusiasts and gamers who keep a PC for not as long as everyone else. Like whatever that magic time frame is, maybe less than a year, but you're keeping it for maybe a year or two. Whereas in an enterprise, what's your refresh cycle? If you've got 100,000 users, your refresh cycle is probably 6 or 7 years, right? And you want that support.
You want it to be as long as possible.
Long as possible. You want to put that upgrade off for as long as possible. Agreed, Jeff. But a gamer, you may be like, well, they're going to upgrade to the latest processor so they can get the faster RAM, so they can get the faster graphics card, which really, I should have put that order differently. They want the faster graphics card, and so they're going to upgrade for that. But then also what may trigger an upgrade is faster other components, PCI Express lanes, the whole thing. They're upgrading faster, man. They want to play the latest games, which is kind of funny now. My UEFI and Secure Boot searches that I have are filled with Battlefield 6. And that's because Battlefield 6 made people enable Secure Boot in order to run the game because they're relying on that for some of their anti-cheat. For, I think, a huge chunk of their anti-cheat. From what I gathered, there's multiple anti-cheat mechanisms built into games. One of the primary ones is you got to have Secure Boot to prevent people from putting unauthorized software before the OS loads to fool the OS to cheat at my game. Which is amazing, right?
Which is the older people in our community. That's how we all got started, with game cheats.
Right. Except now gaming is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yep.
And cheats tend to erode that trust in that industry, whereas people won't play the game. If there's a game where everyone's cheating, no one wants to play it because they're like, why am I going to do that? Like, you've eroded the integrity of the game. I'm going to go to some other game. So now these companies with a lot of money who are making a lot of money are going, well, we need to make sure nobody can cheat. And it's been an amazing thing to follow in my space, because their Secure Boot is one of those things that people are like, I must have seen dozens of articles, more so than ever before, on how to enable Secure Boot on your PC because there's so many people. The report I read earlier today or yesterday was that whoever makes Battlefield 6, I forget the parent company name, but they thwarted like 300,000 potential cheats just by enforcing the Secure Boot requirement. And I think the game is still in like limited beta. There was other YouTubes that were accused of cheating. Then I found this other website that like ranked all the anti-cheat software that you can buy. Like, you can basically go buy this stuff that will circumvent all these anti-cheat things. Some of those are hardware that utilize DMA attacks. So you buy a PCI card, and what was it? My coworker Vlad was saying, you buy a PCI, I think, network card, and or some kind of card, and you plug your mouse into it, and it uses DMA injection attacks to enable the aimbot, so your mouse is basically bypassing the anti-cheat. Like, it's so crazy.
Back in the early days, you cheated just by having better bandwidth.
Right. Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Hey,
or a bigger monitor, right?
Can we shift gears. It's somewhat AI related. I'm curious as to your guys' thoughts. It's all going to be somewhat philosophical, but the idea that Perplexity is offered to buy Google Chrome.
Yes. Well, this scares me because Perplexity put out a press release that they wanted to have their own browser and basically collect all kinds of private information from you.
Right. Which is
That's
what
scary.
the browsers have been doing for years
with different
for
like
good
fits and
motives,
starts, right? They try and do shady things, and I feel like people in our community and adjacent communities are like, that's super shady, you can't do that anymore. And then they're like, okay, we won't do that anymore. And there's just constant checks and balances.
So it's an unsolicited offer, so it may not go anywhere, but just the idea that a company like Perplexity would go out and acquire Google Chrome. I mean, I'm using Google Chrome to log into Riverside because Riverside doesn't work with any of the other browsers.
Yeah.
And how many other applications that are out there that are kind of in the same boat? I mean, my company's website doesn't work terribly well on Firefox. It's written for Google Chrome. How many things are written for Google Chrome? And the fact that it might be written for a company that at least you'll know up front that they're collecting everything that they can about you.
There's a lot of reasons to run Firefox for security and privacy. However, usability, like you've already outlined, Jeff, is one of the reasons.
Well, I just use it because it's Mosaic. It was the first, and I'm like,
Firefox is great though. I have no qualms with Firefox. The number one driving reason why I don't use Firefox, because everyone needed to know this apparently, is that you don't have your Chrome profiles. Chrome profiles, like I can tie a Google account to a Chrome profile and switch between them seamlessly in Chrome. That's something Firefox and other browsers have really struggled with. But in Chrome, it works so seamlessly that I'm like, all right, I'll still use Chrome. But as the privacy inside Chrome erodes, I'm like, man, I really need to look at Firefox. uBlock Origin was one of the ones that almost put me over the edge. And now that I verbalize that out loud, I almost want to try and go back and start to switch back to Firefox again.
Well, it mentioned it in the article, and I didn't have a chance to dig into it. I don't know if you guys know any of the backstory, but apparently Google got in trouble with antitrust violations because of the way that they're using Google Chrome. So whoever it is, the Federal Trade Commission, would kind of like Google to get out of the Google Chrome business anyway. So I think they're under pressure to divest it to another company. I don't know if Perplexity is the right kind of company to send it to. I don't know if there's companies out there that can survive on a browser.
How do you feel about Perplexity and the privacy implications of them either having their own browser or implementing Chrome?
I think you're right to be concerned. I mean, Google is already extremely rapacious about spying on you, using that data to target ads. But Perplexity has shown themselves to be even more rapacious and unethical. They even ignore the robots.txt file and crawl your data whether you like it or not. And they don't even have enough money to fulfill this offer. They're getting money from venture capital firms, and those guys are just all about the money. So they will certainly want to screw more money out of that data. This is not improving things for the consumer to move Chrome from Google to Perplexity.
Well, no, I lost track of what your first thought. You packed in a lot of information there, Sam. Sorry, you overloaded my circuits. But the second part with venture capital,
right?
I 100% agree. It's a valid concern, because then it becomes about profit, not about privacy or security. They're like, we gave you this money. Like, where's our return? And Perplexity is going to go, well, we're going to make that money in fucking ad revenue, hand over fist, and screw privacy and security, throw that out the window.
Yeah, and Perplexity already has a bad reputation for being very rapacious and ignoring privacy and security concerns more than Google. Even without the venture capital.
The crawling bots and ignoring robots.txt, every LLM is doing that now. This is the war that's happening, with crawlers. I think we figured out that. Well, I think there's two scenarios. One, the LLMs are doing their own crawling and indexing and consuming of that information and trying to get around the restrictions we put in robots.txt, which is basically like a warning sign or a no trespassing, like do not enter, whatever. I liken it to like you've got the doors at the restaurant that always swing in and out and open, and you just put "Do Not Enter" on there, and there's no lock, right? But I don't think that necessarily speaks to their privacy and or security posture. That speaks to, I just think we need to have a more free and open internet that allows both bots and people to crawl websites, and we need to find some common ground. Like I understand the business impact to, if we allow all the crawlers, like our website traffic's going to go up and that's going to increase our costs. Like there needs to be some way around, some way to manage that process where we all can gain access to the information programmatically through bots, through LLMs. Because I think as a website owner, you want your information in these various systems, but you don't want it to be taxing and start to hit your bottom line. So I get the thing there. I don't think that's related to security and privacy necessarily. I don't think there's a privacy violation of them crawling sites, is there?
I think it shows their attitude. I mean, it shows that they don't care about anything except getting all the data.
Right.
And I would not trust them to honor any privacy rules any more than anything else. They've shown themselves to be sort of ruthless, rapacious data grabber.
Right, right.
I don't know if it qualifies as a privacy issue, but the idea that you would want to have some sort of control over who has access to your information, which we sort of gave up when we started using the internet. But the idea that, if you like even go into a website where you have to give up your email to gain access to something, and then, I mean, I experienced this. I'm sure you guys experienced, for the next 6 months, you start getting all sorts of unsolicited email from all sorts of different places. Like, okay, somebody sold my email address. I wonder who it was, type of thing. So the concept of opt-in, opt-out is, I don't know if that's technically a privacy issue.
I tend to
a data sovereignty issue, maybe.
Yeah, oftentimes I think of Michael Bazzell, OS Intel Techniques, and the fabulous resources that he has for being anonymous and maintaining your privacy on the internet. And just if you follow his philosophy and process, you're like in a great place in terms of privacy and being anonymous and opting out of all these things. It is a lot of work, but like also once people like us that have been on the internet for 25 plus years to like start that now is super hard. Right. And I mean, he does have resources to help you do that, but it's, oh man, it's a lot of work. But I look at sometimes the amount of spam email and calls and texts I get, and I'm like, man, I wish I had paid more attention to that. And I'm like, maybe I should put some effort into, taking myself off those lists and doing the things that he has documented on his site. But it's a lot of work, man. You can make some good strides. Better to do that like from the get-go, because then it's basically like you're building privacy technical debt over time. So
the other thing, you added in your teaser, so we would be remiss if we didn't mention it, but AOL suspending dial-up.
Crazy, right? who's still
using it?
For the youngins out there, and I think Jack Rosider on Darknet Diaries may have mentioned this in relation to something he was talking about in the show. But like back in the day, I think it was the most recent episode, and it reminded me, like, back in the day, we had to pay by the minute, by the hour. We had to pay by time to access the internet. I mean, similar to how way back in the day, we might have had to pay to use a computer, right? Time sharing computers. Then we fast forwarded to about the 90s. And if you wanted access to the internet, you had to pay by the minute. And it's interesting. He was interviewing kind of infamous black hat hacker, if you will, from Vietnam. And that's how this person got their start. And I think there was a lot of people that got their start being going, I don't have any money, or maybe I live in the US and, I have parents and they're providing for me. But if I were to run up $100 or more in 1990s money, accessing the internet, I'm a teenager. I don't have a credit card. I don't have a job. Like, my parents would be pissed. And so people like my friend Bob and others, would go, how do I get free internet access?
Right.
Do I compromise someone's account? And then they started learning the ways of black hat hacking in order to gain access to the internet. And
Well-
AOL was one of those conduits. I mean, some of us would take the free trial AOL.
Mhm.
So how do you explain that to people who weren't?
Well,
like,
and it goes
we
back
all didn't
even-
have access to the internet, but some big companies did, and they charge you per the minute. But in order to bait you into that, they sent you a CD-ROM, which was like a big coaster that you put in your computer. They
Well,
sent you a
before that, it was
CD-ROM.
the save icon.
It was
Come
a
on
save
now.
icon. It was a floppy
It was a
disk or it was a
3.5-inch
CD-ROM, right? And you would have to register with some information, and I think that had to be unique every time. So we'd always create like these fake identities, right?
Right.
And they give you 20 hours, 100 hours free off of that, and then you use that time up. Then you go find another CD, create another fake identity, basically, and do that. I mean, essentially, that's fraud, and we shouldn't have been doing that. But it was just because we wanted access to the internet, which I believe now. I like the kind of notion we have now where let's get as many people on the internet as possible. Let's make it a commodity. Let's make it like a utility, like water and power, and have internet be in that class of things. But yeah,
Mhm.
back in the day, man, you had to dial up and you had to pay. And it was interesting. Like you had the internet, but then you had the AOL and CompuServe kind of
Yep.
ecosystems that had their own chat things, had their own chat rooms. And there was a whole bunch of shenanigans going on in AOL chat
Well,
rooms.
and it goes back a little bit
AOL
further.
Instant Messenger. Oh my God.
AIM.
AOL Instant Messenger was a wretched hive of scum and villainy back in the day.
But the legacy goes back to phone lines, landlines, and the fact that the way you access the internet in the early days was over a phone line.
Right.
And back when we all had landlines in our homes, we didn't have mobile devices and cell phones. You were paying for your phone access, so it was
Right.
it was a natural extension of that. But
Yeah, if you didn't have a local number, you had to call a long distance number.
Yep.
That's
Well, and I
explain
grew up,
that to someone that didn't grow up in that in that time too. Like we
Well,
had to pay for long distance phone calls. Which,
yeah, well, and long distance was based on the way that the physical network, the phone network, was laid out. Because I lived in the suburbs of Washington D.C., so my local area code,
Mhm.
you could make free phone calls to anybody in your area code. When I
Right.
moved closer to Fort Meade back in the day, I was still in Maryland. I was still pretty close to everybody, but I got a Washington-based number, whereas a lot of my neighbors had a Baltimore-based number, different architecture. So I would literally have to pay called long-distance charges to call my next-door neighbor because they were on a different trunk, or to call some of my family that were on a different trunk. If it wasn't the same truck, you're paying long distance. So the early hackers were freakers trying to get free long distance and trying to beat the phone company. So it all weaves together.
Yeah.
I wonder if the AOL dial-up still existed in parts of the country where internet access isn't as prevalent. Which
and I wonder if they could get
the
Starlink.
geography.
I wonder if the satellite internet like Starlink, with that technology coming on, that fueled the decision to be like, yes, there's some people in rural areas that are using dial-up still, but they could transition to satellite internet like Starlink, and so we don't have to support those. And just over time, that number dwindled to the point where,
right?
Well, it's Yahoo owns AOL now, I believe, is what it said in the article.
Yep.
So yeah. Anyway, one last story I did want to cover that I thought was really interesting was persistent risk in the XZUtils backdoor is still lurking in Docker images.
Mhm.
So just for context, right? XZUtils, it wasn't a vulnerability, like a malicious insider planted a backdoor in that package. Docker images are kind of like a light virtual machine that builds a Linux distribution.
Mhm.
If you hadn't updated your Docker image, it's going to pull in packages that are, one, vulnerable, but also may contain backdoors. Now, this has been a problem that I've talked about since I first learned what Docker was and Docker images. I would go look at them and go, well, you're just building a light virtual machine that has a ton of vulnerabilities in it. And Docker then created Docker Hub, where people could publish their Docker images. And ever since inception, people published Docker images that had lots of vulnerabilities and potentially backdoors. This has been a problem since the first Docker Hub was stood up and accepted people's images. It's still a problem today, and all the time in between is that you could adopt someone's Docker image, which is basically a set of instructions on how to build a light virtual machine that mostly runs Linux. And if it wasn't the most up-to-date stuff, you were building your application on top of something that had vulnerabilities. What we've learned over time, and what I think, look, by the way, I give them props for the research. Absolutely, we shouldn't have Docker images that contain things like backdoors. It's a great intersection of there was a popular backdoor in open source software. Docker images implement open source software, so naturally, Docker images are going to have this issue. Great to put those pieces together, but I think the real answer is twofold. If you're looking at building something based on Docker, one, build your own Docker containers. It's much easier than it was before. There's a lot more documentation than when I was doing it back in the day. And if you know Linux, I guarantee you, with a little bit of time, you can learn how to build great Docker containers. There's so much information online now on how to do that. It's great. I've actually taught classes on how to break and build, Docker back in the day. But also you can use Docker. And if you don't want to go through that work, you can go to, now I forget the name of the company, but there's a vendor, and I think they make Hardened Vault is the vendor, and they harden Docker images. They bring down that number of vulnerabilities, and they make those available to you. And I believe they have both open source and paid for versions. So like if you're a company and you're like, I don't want to house all this expertise on how to build an amazingly secure Docker environment, you can go to folks like Hardened Vault and you can be like, you know what, I just want your images, because they're putting all the work in to harden those Docker images, make sure they have like basically next to zero vulnerabilities in them. And then I build my application on that. So I don't think today in 2025, we should really have this problem. The problem being it's an open ecosystem and anyone can publish a Docker container and it can be out of date. And if you're building your app or infrastructure on Docker containers, you need to, again, one of those two options, either build it yourself or implement someone else's hardened containers. And that's really the answer. If you want to see more content on building really hardened Docker containers, let me know. I probably pull some out of my butt. That was kind of like my thing. I'd always look at people's Docker and I'm like, you don't want to do it that way. Like it's not even just the vulnerabilities in the software. It's how you construct your Docker container. It's the configuration. There's a lot of nuances there. So,
all right.
Just a couple of hardware things really, really quickly. A LilyGo has a LilyGo T LoRa pager that looks really cool. My story number 12. And if you're into the Bus Pirate thing, which is a device to do a bunch of debugging protocols, I think there's multiple projects that have put the Bus Pirate software on an ESP32. Really, really cool GitHub repo with some awesome software that I want to test out. They're supporting things like the M5 stack hardware. So basically you can turn your cheap ESP32 device into a Bus Pirate. Now the Bus Pirate platform is amazing. I've used that before. It's a little buggy, granted. I'm looking at TieGuard. I got one of those devices that I want to test that I think is a really good platform as well, used by a lot of reverse engineers and hardware hackers. But pretty cool that you can take your kind of off-the-shelf ESP32 devices and use the Bus Pirate software on them. That's really cool.
All right.
Awesome. Sam and Jeff, thank you for coming on this edition of Paul Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. That concludes the show for this evening. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Over and out.